Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining me for the next half hour. I just want to take a couple minutes and first of all, I want to thank all the people that have sent me all kinds of emails throughout the course of the last 7 days with specific questions that they wanted me to ask. The one thing I would like to ask all of you that are on this call, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to chat them in. But what I have is one simple request. Word them in a way that I can really quickly understand them. I don't want to take a lot of time trying to read and decipher them. So be very distinct, very clear on what your question is, and I'll try to address as many as I can. So before I go on to the specific questions that everybody has either sent me in advance or those of you that are on the line and want to chat a few in, I'm just going to take a minute here and tell you very quickly about the North Shore Executive Networking Group because we are the largest job search organization in the country. In fact, last year we had over 500 members land new jobs. The membership is free. There's absolutely no downside to becoming a member in this organization, and you get a couple free things from the moment you join. One is you're going to get access to our 9,300 members, and then you will get access to 3 webinar recordings from me, one of which is how to find a job during COVID-19, and I know that's challenged a lot of people over the last 18 months. And then 2 90-minute Q&A sessions on a lot of different questions from folks across the country on all different aspects of job search, some of which we'll probably touch on tonight. But you'll also get the advantage of networking with a lot of folks in this group who have connectivity into a lot of firms that you want to get into and may not be able to on your own. And that's one of the greatest things about networking because you never know where a great networking contact can come from. There's no such thing as a bad LinkedIn connection because it's not so much who these people are that you're connected to, it's who they can lead you on to. And so I never dismiss anybody, regardless of what their job title might be or where they live and work, because we've got connections all over the country and all over the world. So please take advantage of the fact that there are so many people in here with several thousand connections. I also urge you to join our LinkedIn group. We have, advertisers that are promoting jobs up here. It's a great safe place to ask questions of other job seekers. And of course, for those who have landed, it's a really good environment in which to ask questions beyond what we're going to do here to other folks that have lived in your shoes. I also want to make you aware of some of the many resources that are available at NSENG, and just 2 of them are the webinar and workshop recordings that are available. I've got 20 of them on all different aspects of job search. You can look at them on the website and see what they're all about and decide whether or not some of these are going to be of particular interest and value to you. Here are a few upcoming events. This Wednesday, I'm going to be conducting an hour-and-a-half session together with 𝗲𝗃𝗃, who is an executive presentation coach. And so much of the job search is about the presentation, and most importantly, being able to convey confidence. And a lot of people get very nervous preparing for an interview, and it comes through as nervousness, and that's not what we want to exude. So we are going to do some mock interviews with folks. Elliot's also going to share, from his many years of coaching folks, the things that, he does in the way of training and exercises that you can then take from this experience and apply them immediately. The next Q&A session that I'm going to do here on LinkedIn Live will be on Monday, the 25th of April, and I'm going to go back to my regular time from noon to 12:30 Central Time, and I'm hoping this is going to continue to be a regular thing. So I'm always looking for feedback. Any of you, good, bad, indifferent, I always love to hear from you as to whether or not you think these sessions are helpful to you. And then on Wednesday, May 11th, I'm going to be doing a 3-hour online workshop on how to create and implement an effective job search plan because so many people never really take the time to map out what their plan is all about. And you've got to. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of inefficient and wasted time chasing things that are not the best use of your time. So I break down the day. I talk about the priorities. I list out 25 essential things that you've got to have in your job search in order to be effective. And then we look at each one of them individually. So again, any questions that you might have tonight, don't hesitate to bring them up in the chat. And the last thing I wanted to mention was my job search coaching. I do it in really 3 different ways. One is job search coaching packages you can see on the website. The second is one-on-one customized coaching services that I can tailor to whatever your needs are. And then the third is a hybrid model where you can start with a coaching package. And if you have other things that you'd like me to do for you that you can't otherwise do on your own, I'm always open to doing that on a customized basis. I'm going to urge you to take action as quick as you can. If you haven't yet joined our group, join it. It's free. You're going to get some great benefits on the front end. Join our LinkedIn group. It also very beneficial. Become a member of the group, and then link in with me if you are not linked in, and I'll give you access to my 24,000 LinkedIn connections. Check out the library of resources, look at the upcoming events, and check out the coaching if you feel you need some help. Now, anything on the job search is something you can bring up during the course of the next 25 minutes, so please don't hesitate to chat them in. I am going to give a priority to some of the people that emailed me in advance, so I'm going to start with those first, and then we'll take it from there, okay? So here's the question, and it's fairly long, but I think a lot of you are going to identify with this. How does one handle during interviews a request from the hiring manager, the interviewee, that they've asked the interviewee, you, to complete a project? This usually mirrors what you've been hired to address. For instance, if you were interviewing for a vice president of IT asset management, you might be asked to construct a PowerPoint presentation covering what you see as all the challenges to implementing your revised IT asset management plan for the organization, how you would overcome those challenges to implementing your plan, your 30, 60, and 90-day plan, the timeline, the cost, the personnel needed, and so on. The hiring manager explains that he wants to see details. How does one protect their intellectual property and knowledge and not give away free consulting, yet answer the hiring manager's request for a project presentation? And I can tell you this, I love this question because it's happening to a lot of folks, particularly at the middle and more senior levels. Because for one thing, companies want to see how you present. They want to see you in action. They want to see how you talk. They want to see how you really construct your thoughts and how you communicate your attitude, your motivation behind what you're saying, and how you provide clarity amongst some distinct things that you want to bring across. Now, I think my advice here, and you have to be careful because you do want to sell yourself, and your presentation is probably going to be one of the most important sales tools you have in this interview process. And they don't ask you to do this on the front end early on in the process. They're only asking you because you are a very serious candidate that they want to consider. So what I want you to think about is sharing with them the what, but not the how. Okay, and so here's what I mean by that. Share with them what you would do, but don't go into the details necessarily that tells them how you would do it. That to me is a lot more of your intellectual property. It's how you do it. But a lot of companies, well, maybe in many regards, they might have a sense for what they might like to see done, and they're trying to see whether or not you think like them. Or if you bring something refreshing and different, maybe something that they've never thought of before. But you've got to, be willing to accept the fact that this is probably your greatest opportunity to truly sell yourself and your skills, because they want to know what your thought process and methodologies are. So you can't hold back so much that you shortchange your candidacy. But you can be a bit careful on how you would do the work. The more important thing for them, I think, at this point is what it is you would do. They don't necessarily know how you would do it. So please keep that in mind. It's one way to protect yourself. And I think it's important at this point for you to be able to convey to them exactly, what it is that you have in the way of a process. Here's another question that came in. It's ironically from an individual who's located in an area of the country that experiences great weather throughout the entire year. This comes to us from Hawaii. Now, the comment here is, in the water sports related firms, I grapple with the idea of noting my length of water sports industry experience, which is 25 years. On one hand, it's an asset, but I'm concerned I may be setting myself up for ageism issues. Further, I worry that the length of my tenure at one company may be perceived as a negative. In my cover letters, I have presented both ways. which is better? And she gives me two examples of how she is essentially presenting herself. Think of this as a real quick elevator pitch in just one sentence. So here's one way she presents herself. I'm a hands-on water sports marketing executive with 25 years of marketing experience for Hawaii's largest snorkel gear product developer and retailer. Great. And she's telling them very clearly what industry she's coming from. The alternative to that, she says, is I possess a strong go-to-market consumer products background, bringing product solutions to market for a snorkel gear developer and retailer. So on the first one, she's identified herself clearly as being somebody who comes from the water sports industry. In the second, she's trying to position herself more as a consumer B2C marketer. So I've thought about this a little bit, and I've just come up with two slightly different approaches, but I like a lot of the wording in here, and here's just, something to consider. And there is no one absolute right way to do this. Here's one alternative to consider. I'm a hands-on I love the go-to-market phrase, okay? I'm a hands-on go-to-market water sports executive with over 15 years of experience launching new consumer product solutions for Hawaii's largest snorkel gear developer and retailer. The thing about this one is we're not telling them about the full expanse of years. So if you're concerned about the age discrimination potential, you can ratchet it down to 15. 15 is plenty. And I think it will demonstrate to them that you're deep in this industry. But at the same time, you've been able to, to tell them quite a bit about your experience. An alternative to that might be a little bit more general. I'm a hands-on go-to-market consumer products executive with over 15 years of experience launching new product solution for Hawaii's largest water sports developer and retailer. I think the important thing here is you decide whether or not you want to portray yourself as a consumer marketer or a water sports marketer. But I think, depending upon the companies you're going after, because in some cases you may be going after companies that are not in the water sports industry, in which case you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into that water sports vehicle. So I think you've got a couple choices here, and you can tailor them depending upon the company and the industry they're in. Here's another one that's come in. Let's see here. How do you manage ageism and overqualification in interviews? Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to do this, and I've got an hour and a half webinar recording that does address this in great detail. I've come up with about 23 different issues that you can put into play to help eliminate or at least reduce the ageism issue. So one thing that I do recommend a lot of folks, particularly if you're over the age of 50, grab a millennial. Grab a millennial and ask them about their perceptions of older workers. Because some of you, while you may be in your late 40s, you may be in your late 50s or more, you may be working for a millennial because they make up over 50% of the workforce today. So you need to understand, their attitudes toward the older workers, because there is a lot of age discrimination. But I think more important for you is the perception that these individuals have of older workers. And what are some of the potential stereotypes that they have that you need to address? You also need to make sure you're keeping current on technology. And there are ways in which to get trained in areas that you may be a little deficient. One thing that I will mention, and it's one of our sponsors, is the 𝗰𝗹𝗲 program that our federal government provides to job seekers. It stands for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, WIOA. I urge all of you to look into this because 𝗰𝗹𝗲 programs exist in every major city in this country. And what's really great about the 𝗰𝗹𝗲 program is that, for the training companies, and our sponsor Microtrain is very active in this, they have been approved to be 𝗰𝗹𝗲 training companies. And as a result, they can provide training to you for free. I'm going to repeat that. It's no cost training, and this training is pretty significant. It can be Six Sigma, it can be project management, it can be business process improvement, all kinds of software languages. There's no end to this. The reason they can provide it for free to you is because they are getting funded by our federal government. So when they work with you on applying for your grant to the government for this 𝗰𝗹𝗲 training, they're going to get paid by the government, which means they can pass the training on to you for free. And I can tell you, just on behalf of NSE&G members, we've had over 100 of them get free training from Microtrain in this case anywhere from between $8,000 and $10,000 at no cost to them. And so if you're not located in the Chicago area or southern Wisconsin or northern Indiana area, just go on to Google, look up WIOA training companies. You'll find some in your local area. But for those of you that are in that area, I urge you to check out microtrain.net. And they've got a special landing page set up for NSENG members at /NSENG. So great opportunity and great way to potentially alleviate some of the overqualification and age discrimination issues. I'd love to spend more time on it, but I cover it quite honestly in an hour and a half, and obviously there's a lot of material. Here's another question that's come in here. Do you believe the recruiting companies and more importantly, the recruiting and hiring process has gotten better over the years? And my simple answer to that is absolutely not. No. My personal opinion, and it's interesting, I put a poll out there a few weeks ago. Some of you on the call may have been participants in the poll. I had over 400 people vote. 93%, and here was the question. Do you believe that the recruiting and hiring of companies today are doing a good job? And 93% of the 400 plus votes said absolutely not, no. And they all had stories. I had over 100 comments from people that have responded to this. And there was a tremendous commonality between the feedback. And it was the whole notion of ghosting. People and ghosting has, a few different ways in which to interpret. Now, my feeling is you apply to an online ad and you're one of 100 people. Do you feel that you absolutely have to get a response from every single one of those? I think you got to accept the fact that a lot of these organizations are pretty buried with large numbers of people responding still today, even with the low unemployment. So I wouldn't, have your hopes up that you're going to hear from every single one. But for those of you who've been at least through a few rounds of interviews, I think every one of those companies owes you an answer because you've invested a lot of your time. And I've got stories from so many people that answered, this poll question who had been through 3, 4, as many as 7 and 8 rounds of interviews where they had invested anywhere from 20 or more hours of their personal time, only to at the end never be told that they were not going to get an offer or that they were going to get an offer. And to me, that's just terribly inconsiderate, very unprofessional, and a very poor reflection on the company. And so when I'm asked, how do I think companies are doing in terms of recruiting and hiring today, I'm not impressed. And I've also heard it from a lot of particularly external recruiters, the folks from search firms, because they are working with a lot of these inside people, the hiring manager and the talent acquisition teams. And one of the biggest issues seems to be the disconnect in communication between the folks on the talent acquisition side and the people that have the power to make the hiring decisions. They are just not oftentimes on the same page. And believe me, I'm not making a blanket statement across all companies. Believe me, there are plenty of companies that do a good job. But I hear a lot of stories, and it's not just happening during COVID-19. It's been going on long before COVID, of companies that have really ghosted folks that have invested many hours of their time through rounds where they've been brought into offices to talk. So that's my open and honest answer to that question. What is more important for the job seeker? Depth or breadth of subject matter? Now, that depends on the job, quite honestly. There are going to be some jobs where being a generalist can be a great asset. But I think those are much fewer in numbers. Now, if you're going to be a senior executive, a marketing director, a marketing VP, a finance VP, it's important that you have that breadth because you're going to be overseeing multiple departments within your bigger group, multiple people that have different skills. But I think once you get to, the managerial level and below, a lot of companies are looking for specialization. And I have seen a tremendous, really move in that direction, where a lot of companies are looking for folks that bring very specific skills so they can fill some of the gaps in the company where they just don't have those skills today. So again, it depends on the job. And of course, the job description should be very clear to you on whether or not they're looking for somebody who has very broad-based background or somebody who's going to be much narrower but extremely deep. So I think the job description has got to be, a really good telltale sign for you. Here's another question. Are certain months of the year better than others for looking for a job? And, I just want to share with you, one fact that I've seen in the 12 years since I first started 𝗲𝘃𝗲𝗄. And the most active time of the year in and year out, has typically been, surprisingly for a lot of job seekers, from Thanksgiving to New Year. Thanksgiving to New Year's Day. And this is unfortunately a time frame when a lot of job seekers tend to slow down, because they think everybody's going on vacation. They're taking holidays, and they are not in the mood to be hiring people. But here's the reason why there is so much hiring at the end of the year. And I've seen this in so many companies that I've worked for. We typically are given a budget at the beginning of the year. And in that budget is headcount. And we're told, hey, you've got headcount for 2 people this year, for 5, for 15. And as you start to come toward the end of the year, and if you haven't used up that headcount that you were granted at the beginning of the year, guess what? It's a use it or lose it situation in many companies, which means if they don't fill up those 3 spots that they still have remaining by the time that December 31st comes around, they may not have those headcount going into January 1st. And that's why I say use it or lose it. And that's why there's a scramble oftentimes at the end of the year where a lot of companies do a lot of hiring because they don't want to lose that headcount because they may not have another chance to get it back. So please, I know we're a long way from the year end, but remember, for those of you that are still in a search, and you start to get around the holidays at the end of the year, do not think that it's game over and there's no point, in accelerating your efforts, because what you do in September and October are going to feed the holiday season. And they're going to be interviewing candidates like crazy based on what they've seen in those 2 preceding months. So now, is there some slowdown during the summer months? Yeah. It happens. It's happened less in the last 2 years because many people have foregone their summer vacations because of COVID. But I think we're going to see a bit of a change this year. There are a lot more people that are traveling a lot more and taking time off. So yeah, it's quite possible that you see a slowdown, particularly in the United States in July and August. But I would never stop, and I would never slow down your activity. That is the curse of failure if you slow things down, because so much of the job search is about building momentum. And it's really important for you to build that momentum constantly. Let's see here. Here's a question about what is the best way to get background on the people that you'll be interviewing with beforehand. And quite honestly, the best way to get background on people that are going to be interviewing you is through LinkedIn. Look at your connections. You can find, you're going to be given the names of the people in most cases of who you're going to be interviewing with. You ought to go onto their LinkedIn profiles. Go anonymously so that they don't know necessarily that you're looking at them, but do take some time to see if you have any mutual connections with them. It's very likely in many cases, particularly if this is somebody in the city where you are, that they may be connected to some people on LinkedIn that you too are connected to. Take a look at who they are. And then reach out to those folks and say, hey, can you tell me a little something about John Jones, who I noticed you're connected to? I've got an interview coming up. I'm going to be speaking with him. And I'd love to find out a little bit about what he's like. You could probably send that out to several people that you may have mutual connections with. And you may find that some of them know them personally, which is a huge advantage because they can tell you a little bit about what they're like as an individual and what they like to do. Which may give you an opportunity to make yourself a more likable candidate in the interview, because you may be able to connect with them on some things that may not appear necessarily in their LinkedIn profile, but somebody who truly knows that person can share, some intimate knowledge about them, things they like to do in their free time. So to me, that's the greatest way to get, intelligence on folks that you might be interviewing with before you even have an opportunity to speak with them. Here's another interview question. I have had a few panel interviews, and they're pretty tough. Are there any suggestions that you have to help make them a little bit easier. Now, I don't know if many of you have had panel interviews, but yes, they can be really challenging because it's you on one side and what could be 3, 4, or 5 people on the other side, all peppering you with questions. Now, one thing that I always urge you to do, and in panel interviews, you likely are going to be told who all these people are and what their responsibilities are. And like my previous answer, I would recommend go into their LinkedIn profile, take a look and see what their backgrounds are all about. And I would suggest that you have specific questions for each one of them, because you might have somebody from operations, one from marketing, another one from sales, and maybe one from finance. They all have a different agenda. But so you need to think about questions you might want to ask them that would show them that you're engaged in their department. But you also want to think about things that you're going to do on your job that could impact each one of those departments. How is what you do going to impact marketing, sales, finance, legal? Okay. And so you've got to do that kind of homework. You have to put yourself in their shoes and think about value you bring that can help each one of those distinct and different departments. And that's how you start to get engagement in a panel discussion. And they know it's not easy. And so if you can get some interaction with them going and potentially bring up things for them that could be very insightful, they start to think, wow, she could really be an asset to my department, even though she doesn't report into it. And that's the kind of buy-in you want to get, because all these folks, they're all going to weigh in on a decision and ultimately have a voice in who's going to be the chosen candidate. So you want to make sure that you make yourself a candidate that can connect with people in multiple departments in that particular case. Here's a question. One of my LinkedIn connections made an introduction to an individual who works in a company that's of particular interest to me. It's been a week and I haven't heard back from that person. Is there anything that I should do? This is tough because you have been introduced to somebody that isn't necessarily somebody you know. Okay. In fact, you probably don't know. So you got to be courteous here. But if you know who that person is and you have a way to reach out to them via email or through LinkedIn, if a week has gone by, you haven't heard anything, and it's somebody that can potentially be of value to you, I would just send them a real short email or an in-mail and just say, hey, I would just, I know that we were introduced 5 days ago from Sally Smith. And I just wanted to follow up and see if you might have 5 minutes for a quick conversation. We all have 5 minutes. So don't ask for a lot and see if you get a response back. And if you don't, then you have to cut bait and move on. And that's one of the reasons why you want to have multiple people introducing you into multiple people in every company that's of interest to you. Because if that person on the receiving end just is non-responsive, that's okay. You've got 2 other people waiting in the wings who might be able to give you some background. So I give people as much as a week, but I do encourage most of the folks that I coach, you know what, 3 days is enough time. If you haven't heard within 3 days, then ping them, send an email, say, hey, just wanted to follow up, see if you had 5 minutes, just have a couple quick questions, and was wondering if we might be able to find a time that works for you. So here's another question that came in. It says, my PMP certification has lapsed. I put off job search should I put off job search until I rectify? Well, you know what? You're the best judge of this. If having your PMP certification and being able to show people that you're current on it, it is important, then you might want to consider, but I don't like anybody, quite honestly, holding off or slowing down their job search. My feeling is move forward, try to get it. There are companies, obviously, that can help you get it very quickly. I mean, Microtrain is great at this, but I encourage it. Don't really, wait until it happens. You can always tell people that I've had it. I'm just getting it recertified, which tells people, you know what, you've already qualified in the past. The recertification is not going to be a big deal. You've got, you've already earned the kind of, credits and qualifications that were needed in the past. And I think we all recognize that recertification shouldn't be a big deal if you've already passed in the past. So please, I don't, suggest that you slow down. Keep going after it, but keep going after your next creative job opportunity. What is the minimum number of LinkedIn connections that someone should have? There is no minimum number, but I will suggest that you try to get at least 501. So why 501? Because we all look the same on surface when our profiles show the number of connections and it says 500 plus. So whether you have 501 or 5,001, superficially, we all look alike. And you don't know how many connections that person actually has unless you go down to the activity portion of their LinkedIn profile, which most people don't do. And it will tell you how many followers they have. And the number of followers and the number of connections typically are almost identical. So I urge you, for those of you that are not at the 500 mark yet, get to it, because it tells people who are interviewing you that you're a connected individual. You aren't somebody who just sits behind their computer and doesn't engage their audience. And that's important because we want to hire people that are engaged. We want to hire people that demonstrate their ability to interface with other folks. And that's part of what that does. I just want to close out here with a couple quick reminders. And, I'd love to hear back from you. If you think these are good for you, you're getting benefit out of them, don't hesitate to let me know because I'd love to hear. Next Monday, 12 to 12:30, I'm going to be doing this again. I'm going to make this a continuation and a regularity. On Wednesday of this week, I've got this, webinar coming up on how to, speak with greater confidence during interviews. And then on April 25th, the next one will be a job search Q&A session here. So if you've got questions, please just email them to me in advance. And again, I will always prioritize those folks that send them to me in advance. And I urge you all, if you haven't yet joined nsE&G, please take advantage of it because it's free and you're going to get the opportunity to network with 9,300 people and you're going to get the free webinar recordings from me. So again, thanks so much for taking a little bit of your afternoon and joining me, and all the best in your job search. Take care.